Since both Mama and Fritz worked through the afternoons, it was sometimes my job after school to stop by the market for food. Most things were gone by then, but Mama said that made choosing easier. This was true. Often by the time I got there, the choice was between red cabbage or white cabbage, as if I cared which one went into my basket. Today I wandered the aisles, hoping something more exciting would be available. I could afford it if there was. The government kept the prices of everything we might need very low. It's just that the shelves were always more empty than full, and what was on them looked or tasted as gray as everything else. The good food was called benders because if you had something worth trading, the clerk would bend down under the counter to get it for you. But Mama didn't want us bargaining for food. Just take what is offered on the shelves and come home quickly, she always said. More than anything, I longed for a banana. We used to have them years ago, and for my 12th birthday last fall, Fritz had bought me one off the black market. I still remembered its taste. Can you imagine living in a world where a banana is a treat and her last banana that she had was years ago? Oh, that breaks my heart. Finally, I got some chicken, a few potatoes, and of course, cabbage. I also picked up a few cans of cola, proudly made in East German factories. Fritz thought it left a bitter aftertaste and said one day he'd smuggle in some real Western cola for us. After that, he said you'll never want our cola again. If that's true, then don't get it, I had responded. It'll be one less thing I can buy. Once in line, I stared at the people ahead of me, watching them watch nothing at all because it was safer that way. Mama described us as practical, durable, strong people, which I think she meant as a compliment, though I never took it as that way. Our strength came from the collective, from the group. Every school teacher I've ever had said this until it played into my head like a skipping record. Individuality was a weakness, a sickness to the West. So we all walked in step, eyes ahead, with conversations at a minimum. We all smiled, but not much, and frowned, but rarely cried. Nobody could succeed here, but most people around me seemed to be okay with that. It meant they wouldn't fail either. I didn't want to be like them. And at the same time, I was beginning to forget how to be different, how to be my own self. It was the feeling of being swallowed up, and I hated it. That was all I thought about as I hurried home with my groceries. We lived on the fourth floor of a drab apartment building that looked more or less like all the other apartment buildings. That wasn't an accident. Beautiful things were a sign of individuality. Wherever possible, Mama had tried to provide some beauty inside the apartment, but still, our furnishings were spare and simple. The furniture. With little to look at inside, I went to my room and stared down to the small garden space below. I had buried the peel from Fritz's banana there, hoping it would sprout into a tree this spring. I knew it was impossible, but I still looked every day. And when the tree wasn't there, I always turned my attention to the wall. If I got the angle just right, I could see into West Berlin. There's nothing but greed and selfishness on the other side, my school teacher often told us. If you try to look, it shows nothing but greed and selfishness in your own heart. Well, I was greedy and selfish then, because I could never help but to look. I couldn't see much, but it was somehow seemed brighter across the wall, as if the sun gave more of its light to the west. Maybe because the people there were more selfish, I thought, because we needed the sunlight far more than they did. Then some movement at the wall caught my attention, and when I saw what it was, I laughed. A rabbit had become trapped in the death strip. They often did, but it was always amusing to see the grunzers come running to try chasing it away. They didn't like the prints the rabbits had left behind in their perfectly smooth dirt. Over the past 4 years, what started as a simple barbed wire fence had evolved into an entire system designed to stop, capture, or kill anyone who tried to get through. In most places in East Germany, even before reaching the wall, there was an open border area that nobody would dare get close to unless they had a death wish. People who encountered the Grinzers there on patrol often disappeared, sometimes for days, sometimes forever. Right? What is the author trying to say there? If you disappear forever, saying that they were killed. Behind it was the backland wall, which I passed each day. It was a simple concrete wall that surrounded West Berlin, making that free half of the city an island within communist East Germany. What I knew of that area behind the backland wall came only from the glimpses I saw from my window, or occasionally from Anna's bedroom if she didn't catch me looking, and from what Fritz told me he had seen while out on the bricklaying jobs. Beyond the backland wall was another barbed wire fence that might have been electrified, which I figured was bad enough, but Fritz thought it was something else. He believed touching the wire sent a signal to the guards in the watchtowers. If it was true, that would be worse. That's saying a lot when the guards are worse than an electrical fence. Past that was what we called the death strip. The government hadn't given it that name, but they didn't discourage its use either. Soldiers and fierce dogs often patrolled it. Barriers and deep trenches were set up to stop any vehicles that tried to crash through, and the dirt was left smooth, so on the rare chance that someone did get that far, it would be easy to follow him. Soldiers were ordered to shoot on sight and shoot to kill, meaning they didn't just shoot to scare you. They never hid that fact, and they had done it before. Western television broadcast the pictures of the border guards carrying dead bodies out of the death strip or pulling them from the water. I'd seen it myself, at least when we could catch the television signal here. Our government would then respond with ridiculous excuses such as heart failure or a swimming day gone bad. Well, heart failure didn't cause bleeding wounds rip through a person's gut, and no one ever swam in the Spree River for fun. They had tried to escape and then failed. Reminders of our own fate. Should we try it too? There were some successes, no doubt, though we didn't hear about them as often. Those who escaped usually kept quiet about it. They didn't want their loved ones left behind in the East to be punished. Eventually, the rabbit hopped away, or perhaps someone I couldn't see chased it off. I never could figure out how the rabbits got inside the first place. Since they couldn't pass through the solid concrete, they would have to dig a tunnel underneath. Even the animals wanted to leave East Berlin, I suppose. I would have kept watching for the rabbit, but Mama called me in for supper. I came in and plunked down beside Fritz, but right away it was clear his mind was somewhere else. He picked at the food until Mama finally set down her spoon and said, "You're quiet tonight. What's wrong?" He shrugged. Just a hard day, that's all." No, that wasn't all. I knew it, even if she didn't. Since the wall had gone up, Fritz never told Mama anything that made her more worried or sad than she already was. So, if he went as far as admitting that it had been a hard day, that meant something awful had happened, or would soon. Cliffhanger. Fritz met my eyes and offered a grim smile, but he looked away when Mama turned to me and asked, "What about your day, Goethe? You had a pioneer meeting?" "Yes." I reached for another slice of bread. "They had an announcement. A few days ago, the first person ever to do a spacewalk was outside the spacecraft for over 12 minutes. He's Russian. They want us to be proud of that, though I don't see how it has anything to do with Germany. They want us to be proud because it means the East beat the West. Nothing more." Fritz's tone was more biting than usual. Something definitely was bothering him. I decided to leave it alone. After all, sometimes I don't want to talk either. "Where's the butter?" he asked. I shrugged. Food shortages. Butter never lasted long on the shelves. Trying to distract us both, Mama asked, "Did anything else happen today, Goethe?" Immediately, I thought of having seen Dominic. Ever since that moment, I had debated whether to tell them. Would Mama be happy that I had seen him, or sad because she had not? I didn't know the answer to those questions, But I was certain of one thing. If either Mama or Fritz had been the one to see Dominic, I would want them to tell me. I hesitated a moment, then, in only a whisper, I said, I saw Dom this morning. The room became as still as a grave, simile, and I almost wondered if Mama thought that's where I said he was. Shouldn't she be asking how he looked, whether Papa was with him, and how I had felt in that moment? But with a stiff voice, she only asked, Where? On my way to school, on one of the platforms in the west. I think he was waiting for me. He knew I would be there. Mama frowned, and the lines in her face deepened. We've talked about this before. You shouldn't be looking over the wall. If the Grenzers caught you, one had. I still got a pit in my stomach when I thought about Mueller's rifle against my cheek, but I certainly couldn't tell her that. Instead, I faced her scolding with my own angers. We wouldn't have to worry about the Grenzers if you'd let us leave with Papa that night. It wasn't the first time we'd had this fight. We all want to be together again. Mama's voice was tired. But it's not possible. You know that. Yes, I did. Some days, all I thought about was ways to get my father back here, or how we might get over to him and Dominic. But never once could I come up with an answer. The wall was larger, stronger, and far more deadly than anyone my age could challenge. I hated that wall and resented my mother every time she tried to make me accept it. Did you hear me? I almost shouted out, but that was better than tears. I saw Dom today, your son! Fritz tried to call me. Gerta, you don't... But it was too late. I slammed my fork on the table and ran to my room. My father would have understood why I waved at Dominic, but Ma didn't. Sometimes I thought she was just like everyone else here, blind to the fact there was an entire world out there beyond the wall. Maybe Mama no longer cared about Papa and Dominic, or had forgotten about them entirely. I never would. The wall will be standing, Chapter 6. The wall will be standing in 50 and even in 100 years if the reasons for it are not removed. Erich Honecker, First Secretary of East Germany from 1971 to 1981. It was a Beatles night. Beatles, the band. Fritz lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, while I sat cross-legged on the floor with a book I had been given up on reading. In the background, John Lennon harmonized with Paul McCartney as they sang Philosophies of Love in a language I barely understood. Remember, they're in Germany, so they speak German. If it weren't for the Beatles, I wouldn't have known any English at all. For me, it's the lyrics. Fritz had taken an English course in school and spoke it much better than I did. The things they write could never be played here. Of course not, I said with a smile. It'd corrupt us, meaning it would make us bad people. Personally, I preferred the tunes, although mostly I liked the Beatles simply because we weren't supposed to like them, or for that matter, even know about them. But all the kids did. Fritz's friends especially. The boys smuggled in albums we weren't supposed to have and pictures of shiny Ford Mustangs we'd never own. And the girls got fashion magazines and colorful beaded necklaces to hide under their mattresses. Even though she never stopped Fritz and wouldn't turn anyone in, Mama disapproved. She wanted us to buy the censored albums instead. But that... I missed the whole point of rock and roll. Nobody wanted approved music. I wondered if maybe Mama wasn't angry that I had seen Dominic. Maybe it made her sad because nothing she could do would bring him home again. I never should have told her about Dom at supper, and I never should have yelled. Fritz must have been thinking about that too. Mama loves them as much as you do, Gerta. She misses them as so much it hurts her to talk about them. You can't be angry with her that father is gone. He was right, of course. I didn't want to be angry, but sometimes it was the only emotion I understood. I missed my father singing to me at bedtime and the earthy smell of his coat before he left for work each morning. Sometimes he snuck a kiss from my mother when he thought no one was looking, and it always made me giggle. I even missed Dominic, the way he used to tease me and hide my dolls and jump out from behind the corners to scare me. Those were good memories now. and our family was like a house of cards in a stiff wind, and when it became too much to feel the pain of our collapse, all I could do was become angry. We need to get to the West to be with them, I said. There's got to be a way through that wall. Of course there is. The only way we know for sure is to try, and there's a high price for being wrong. Are you certain there's a way through that you'd risk dying for? I wanted to say yes more than anything. I wanted to be the kind of person who dared to say yes. Papa would take the risk, maybe Fritz too. But I wasn't so sure about myself. If I knew we'd make it, then yeah, I'd try to cross. And I added, but that's all the bravery inside of me. That's not how bravery works, Fritz said. Courage isn't knowing you can do something. It's only being willing to try. His voice trailed to silence, and the record player spat out static in the gap before the next song began. The needle on the player was going dull. It'd be a long time before Fritz lucked in finding another one. Shortages. Always shortages. Once the music began again, Fritz rolled over to face me and rested his chin on his hands. I gotta tell you something, he said. I wasn't going to, but if you really believe there's a way through the wall, then you ought to hear this. I leaned forward, certain this was a secret he had kept from Mama at supper time. Do you know Peter Warner, Anna's older brother? Sure. I didn't know him well because he was so much older. He was away at the university, but I saw him occasionally on weekends. As the first in his family to attend a university, Peter made their parents very proud, and they talked about him all the time. Peter is going to the West tonight. Nobody knows about it but me. I sat up straight. Not even his family? They'll be furious. He hopes they'll understand and maybe even be happy for him. I paused, letting that sink in, and then I asked, how is he getting out? Some students in the West got a pass to come to East Berlin for a museum tour. They were going to smuggle him out in their car. It was specially designed just for that reason. I shook my head. It sounds dangerous. Talking is dangerous. For you and me, being the children of Aldous Lowe is dangerous. That's why he never sends letters. Just because of who our father is. They probably watch you from the moment you step out of this apartment until you get inside again. If the chance came for me to leave the same way Peter is leaving, I'd take it. I felt a pinch in my chest. It was one thing to think about Anna's brother leaving, but I couldn't imagine if Fritz left too. Would he just disappear like Peter? I was about to ask when a knock came to the door. Fritz looked over at me and with a stern voice said, Don't say a word about this. Don't make Mother responsible for knowing. When I agreed, he got up and opened the door. Mama pushed past him and turned the volume down on the record player. They'll hear you on the street. Not with the windows closed, Fritz said irritably, like angrily. Besides, the police have better things to do than to confiscate teenage music. And how do you know that? Only because they haven't come here yet to do it, that's all. Fritz nodded and then switched off the player. Neither of us were enjoying it now anyways. Off to bed, Goethe. Mama told me, you too, Fritz. I got up off the floor and Fritz gave me a long look before leaving. Mama stopped me in the doorway and put her hands on my shoulders. I'm sorry I became upset before, she said. I was only worried that you might have been caught by one of the border guards. Can you understand that? Yes, that I understand. I am glad you saw Dominic, she said. I wish I could have seen him too. He looked good, I said. He's as tall as Fritz is now, and he looked healthy. Did he seem happy? She asked. I didn't know how to answer that. He must have ached about the divide in our family, just as all of us here did. But he was also free, and I wasn't sure he would give that up, even to be back with us again. So I only shrugged the question away, which seemed enough for her. She kissed my forehead, then said, Now good night, and sleep well. I wished her good night too, but I knew there was no chance of sleeping well. Sometime in the next few hours, the brother of my best friend would vanish into the West. I whispered a prayer that God would see him there safely, and then carry his family through the storm that was sure to follow his disappearance.